Hey, welcome back to Mornings with the Mayor. I'm your host, Mayor Robert Dye. We're back for another in-depth look into our community with some of the issues affecting all of us, and having a conversation about many ideas that are continuing to improve our city, especially as we look to move our community forward. As stated on the last episode, today's discussion, we're probably going to go in a much different direction than we've gone in the past. We're still going to be talking with community members, but talking about things that now more than ever are especially timely. And I'm so grateful to have today's guest allow me to welcome the infamous Kenny Infante, an assistant principal in the C-FBISD and local legend from Carrollton. Kenny, how you doing?
I'm doing well. Happy day there, Mayor Dye. The Texas sunshine's starting to come out, so we've gotten rid of the rain. So I'm actually happy to be indoors right now, enjoying the AC and here with you today.
Yeah, well, you got to be outside yesterday at the Chambers golf tournament. How'd that go? Did you guys lift the trophy at the end of the day?
We did not. Unfortunately, I think I was along with many members that are often working, and so it's actually been a couple years since I swung the club around, but I was with a couple of school board members playing yesterday, and Mr. Ramos, as well as longtime announcer and infamous John Matthews.
Yeah, John, he's been known to get out there and swing the clubs. And I remember just watching you guys off the tee box. His son just crushed one 300 yards. So it was good to see that. I figured you guys were off to a good start from there. But I know you're from Carrollton. We kind of grew up in the same area and ran in the same circles, especially as it relates to select soccer. But what was it like growing up in Carrollton and coming up through the C-FBISD system?
Sure. So there were no hospitals in 1981 in Carrollton, I believe, so that one could bear a child. So I actually was born in Dallas, but the very first day I was able to come home, it was 2030 Chestnut Road, which fed into Furneaux Elementary. And I had a fantastic upbringing. My father actually is from Cuba, and my mother's from Oklahoma City. Ironically, my dad came over when he was 15, and he was actually one of the paper boys in downtown Dallas when JFK was assassinated. So he's got some interesting stories with that. And my mother and him met at a bank together. He was a longtime loan officer, and so they hit it off, fell in love. I've got an older sister. Her name is Tacey. She grew up through Furneaux as well. And then in sixth grade, we had an opportunity, my father, and we actually moved over to Kent Elementary at 1431 West Peters Colony Road. Those of you who don't know, Kent Elementary hides right behind Creekview. And from there, which, by the way, those elementary teachers shaped the way our kids learn. So just going through this pandemic right now, I think all parents know how important those elementary teachers are, because you're having to keep your kids busy at home. But from there, I then ventured down to Blaylock Middle School, where I served, where we all had our kind of weird years going through, but I actually enjoyed middle school because as an elementary student, I was I'd get in a little bit of trouble. I had a lot of energy, so I had to stay busy. And so sports really at that time were kind of what straightened me out in that 7th and 8th grade year, because I realized, well, if I keep acting up, I'm not going to be able to play in this game and play in that game as well as your academic side and keeping your grades up as well. At that time, after I ended at Blaylock, really Creekview's first graduating class was 2001, so you couldn't feed into there. That was the next year that they opened up Creekview. So I'm so proud to be a Newman Smith Trojan alum. And I went there for 4 years. I was a varsity soccer player there for all 4 years. And actually half of my freshman year, I was able to represent the U.S. Soccer team over in Paris, France, and had some really interesting times over there. And for me, soccer was a great outlet to all my energy and just meeting people and living life. So was a big deal of my youth, playing soccer. So that's kind of how I rose through the ranks in Carrollton Farmers Branch.
Yeah, and as a Turner alum, it's hard to hear about the Newman Smith, but it's always been a good rivalry, especially between all the kids at the two schools. But we played for the same soccer club, Comets, and you were always, as one of the older kids, you were always one of the soccer players that the coaches always told us to kind of look up to and kind of look to. How do you practice? What kind of work ethic do you put in, and where do you want to be as a soccer player? Which I think drove our team. Which not to toot our own horn, but we were pretty good, the '84 Comets, and so because of stuff like that, because of great people to look up to, I think we were able to achieve a lot in our time together. But I didn't play soccer in high school as much as I probably should have. Thought I was going to be a lot taller and chose basketball, but I did get to end my high school career with 7 great games on varsity. I just remember Coach Houston, he didn't let me start senior night because he goes, "That's for not playing the first 3 years." And I just looked over, laughed at him and said, "You know what? I respect that. That's a great move. Well played." But after the first ball went out of bounds, he subbed me right in. So it's just like, okay. But it was a good time, good learning opportunity. But what does it mean to you now being able to come back and give back to that same school district? I know you most recently were assistant principal of Vivian Field, but next year got a nice fancy promotion back to your alma mater there, Newman Smith.
Sure, I'm honored, and the good thing about our community and specifically to our school district is that we look to promote those that are within our shell, and we recognize good work, and we push our students who then become adults. It's very important, kind of the process from moving to student to adult. And, it takes hard work and dedication and really meeting the right people, doing the right things. The work ethic aspect is kind of where I'd like to see myself and push myself further because anyone can be smart, I think, but it takes somebody with a little pizzazz that's going to push a little more, ask more questions, go above and beyond. But I love the fact, and by the way, so I went off to college. I went off to Radford University and played a year over there on scholarship and transferred to Tulsa. So I was able to move around. I wasn't just in one spot. But that time away, I realized how much I loved and how green the grass was here in Carrollton Farmers Branch. So, from that, I actually got my degree at University of Oklahoma. So I moved to 3 different undergrad schools, and I chose advertising. And so within that, I didn't realize how hard the business world really was, especially at the bottom. And I just didn't feel, I woke up in the morning, I wasn't excited about work. And so I thought to myself, well, what in life excited you? And for me, at the beginning, it was sports. And so I said, well, what can I do with that? So eventually, I just always remember some of my former coaches, even specifically Renee Putter and actually Dr. Jimenez, who is now the principal at Newman Smith Middle School. They always said, this is something I think you would be good at, teaching, being with kids, coaching kids. So I said, I want to try that route. So I actually went and did my alt cert. And then I was brought on here at Vivian Field Middle School, about 12 years ago as a coach. And I actually did PE and absolutely fell in love, loved it. Even at the middle school level, just the competitive nature. That's really what got me high every morning. I was just so excited to go into work, and you're at the right place and doing the right thing when you're excited to go to work every day. There's so many people out there that I know have to take jobs to support families that they don't enjoy. So I am blessed by our good Lord that I found something that I'm passionate about and that I really enjoy. So I coached for about 8 years, including we were 5 of 8 years as district champs in soccer here at Vivian Field, but we did all sports. And, also to go back to what you're saying, I know we're jumping around, but you said, I thought I'd be a little bit taller. I knew I was going to be short. I looked at my dad and I said, okay, well, you know what? We'll stick with soccer, but I loved all other sports. So I just thought it was funny. So I spent 8 years here at Field Middle School, and that's where I coached. And specifically, I started to go, okay, what else can I do with that? Because this can't just be it. It might be it for most or some or few, but for me, I'm very passionate, and especially some middle school students, maybe not as passionate at times when it comes to certain sports. So I thought I would come home from games and my ears would be so red just from the blood pressure shooting up from the intensity. And I said, well, I want to put some years on my life, because if I keep going like this, it's just not, I don't think it's gonna be healthy. So, and I wanted to make a bigger impact. And so, I guess Dr. Jimenez saw, and she was the principal here at Field during the last 6 years while I was here, and she saw that leadership qualities in me and started pushing me and started putting things in my mind. And so I'm going to go get my doctorate at SMU. Why don't you get into this accelerated leadership program? And, at the beginning I was hesitant because I knew the workload. I knew how many hours I would have to work. I had a brand new baby at home, as well as a 3-year-old at the time. And it was just a lot on my plate, but you know what? I knocked it out in 13 months, and I'm glad I did it, because I wouldn't be here today if I didn't take chances and use my resources around me. Because if you don't do that, you can't do anything on your own. So, I mean, even with the academic background, just putting yourself in an uncomfortable situation sometimes is actually very healthy. So now anything that comes my way, this will actually be my 4th school in 3 years. So I'm not afraid of it, because it happens all the time. So I'm excited about it. I don't know, I might be rambling here, so I don't know if I hit on some of the things you asked about, but after that, I got my first assistant principal job at Dan F. Long Middle School under Sade Dockery, and I'm so happy. Everybody's leadership qualities are different, and she's a tough cookie, and she's exactly what that school needed at that time. And kids over there were fantastic. The kids over here at Field are fantastic. Every kid needs to look up to somebody. I think both Dr. Jimenez and Sade Dockery do an excellent job of that for their kids. They put their kids first. So from there, I then got split schools between Perry Middle School and then Field Middle School, and under Adam Toy, and again with Dr. Jimenez, now as an assistant principal. The blessing is learning from different leadership styles and kind of combining that to come up with your own. And as I say, at every school that I go to, I may think things are different. I may think maybe it shouldn't be done that way, but it's their building. And I look at myself as somebody who needs to go out and set forth and create that path so their vision can be led. My time may or may not come later on down the road, but I'm a big team proponent. So, and then now, just carrying last Friday, I'll now be with the green and gold. So I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, that's awesome, just to see the amount of leadership that you've kind of, worked under. I know Miss Dockery, Mr. Toy, Miss Dr. Jimenez, and then, most recently, Mr. Hunter. I mean, 4 very different personalities. Miss Jimenez is like high energy, super excited in your face. And so it's fun. It's fun to, I've always enjoyed being around her, but just seeing her leadership style and how much she cares about the kids and having that rub off on you. But, sure. Mr. Toy and Miss Dockery and, Principal Hunter, like the way that they interact too, it's a care that you see manifest. It spreads all the way down through the teachers and into the kids that, it's good to see, like, how do different things work with different people, especially as you're looking to move up the ladder through the schools.
I would never let it down. I'm so glad you brought up Mr. Hunter. Oh my gosh, I just spoke with you 5 minutes ago. Didn't bring your name up, but he has been nothing but great this year. And I know we're going to get into that later about this year. But anybody, if you would want any principal to lead your kid, that is the man to do it. He doesn't ask teachers to do things he wouldn't otherwise do. His energy is infectious. His heart is charismatic. I mean, he's a fantastic leader. So those of you in Farmers Branch, your kids may or may not feed into Vivian Field Middle School, you would sleep well every night knowing that that's the man that's running the building that your kids go to.
Yeah, he's fantastic. And, I'm excited that Field's going to be getting a brand new school. And it's a great advertisement for people outside of Farmers Branch to know that, hey, we do have school choice and you can send your kids to Vivian Field Middle School no matter where you live, which is great. But, as you brought up and talked about this last year and how interesting it's been just across the board, it's just kind of as a disclaimer, some of the things that we'll probably be talking about here going forward are a little bit more real issues. And I just want, people to be aware that, what we're diving into, might be a little bit harder conversations, but I think they're more important than ever, because when you talk about the amount of work that you're putting in, and you talk about what everyone's going through and what you're hearing and what you're seeing in the communities and probably what you're seeing from parents, just in the school district, working through them with this difficult time, probably going to see, sorry, I had to switch my AirPods there. It's a bigger picture, and it has to deal with mental health, and May is Mental Health Awareness Month. So now more than ever, it's a big issue. And how do we think about the bigger picture? How do we think about something that affects everyone, whether that's directly or indirectly, with people that love and care about? And so, when you think about the pressures of unemployment right now, you think about the pressures of people like, where's my next meal going to come from? You think about finding work. What other outlets do people have for stress with individuals and families and being impacted, and especially with, issues and cases that are on the rise? I mean, just to kind of start out, like, what have you kind of seen in the schools, and how are things impacting you on that level in terms of taking care of some of those needs?
Okay. There's a lot there that you just gave me.
Yeah.
I can speak specifically to how things were before and then after COVID, if that's what you're asking. So
yeah, I'd say just, quickly kind of, what,
Sure.
what are some of the differences that we've seen, especially as it relates to those issues?
Well, being in the school district for the last 12 years, there's been a significant uprise in one-parent households and the stress that comes from the parents. There are some families, there are some kids that show up to school every day that did not get a morning hug, that have not eaten breakfast. So, how do you get one's mind right if they haven't even eaten, or if, the main thing is shelter and feeling safe, and that student's not getting that. So that's a concern. How are we supposed to move forward as a society if I feel like sometimes we're moving backwards? And really, it's education. It's educating them. It's building a belief that just because you were dealt this hand in life early on, that does not make you who you are. I would say moving forward, there's a lot of things since COVID's going on. I thought to myself, there's a lot of Zoom meetings going on with counselors and marriages and the stress of that. And it's not going to be forever or anything like that, but I guess it's being able to go with the times and move along and make changes that are going to help you be successful. Like a quarterback would say is, I'm going to audible this play. I'm going to change it up. Let's not be conventional. Unless you're successful, I don't think conventional would be the way to go. But, we see stress with our kids every day, which you want to bring them and have them supported. And, you try to find those kids that are doing well and meet them and talk about the importance of mentorship and giving back to your community. And, I saw you many years coming up to Vivian Field, and I'm like, hey, what are you up here for? The mayor of Farmers Branch is here to see one student and spend an hour with them. Like, you don't usually see that. And, I would say that's unconventional. You might see a mayor come up in another city and you see him take 2 pictures and they're out. No, man, you were in rooms and really building relationships, and you really genuinely were there for, I know, a couple of our students this year and in years past. So kudos to you, man. It's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, that's been great. And it's been great getting to work with the different, counselors amongst the different schools that I do participate in. Cause, my mentee at Farmers Branch Elementary is now going to be at, Field. And then my kid that was at Field is now at Turner. And so I'm balancing all these schools going back and forth, but it's building that connection and being that positive, influence, I think, because, I grew up in a very different situation than a lot of these kids, and we don't get to choose, where we grow up or how we grow up or what opportunities we're afforded. But when you can recognize that you were given opportunities that other people weren't, how do you give back and say, hey, like, I want you to know, like, people care about you. We want to see you do well. You're a smart kid. You have a lot going for you, and trying to reinforce that maybe they're not getting that at home or being that stable, adult male figure in their life that can help guide them in the way that, I was lucky enough to have, not only my parents and my dad and, other parents in the community do the same thing for me, that, that's kind of what it's about. And when kids are now at home, or parents are now at home more, and there's uncertainty with jobs and the stress, what are their outlets, and how are these kids able to, cope with what they're dealing with? Because so many kids have to deal with their fears, anxieties, stresses, even, on some cases, a lot of them, depression. A lot of people, you don't know what they're dealing with and what that looks like. And, me too. I mean, as being mayor, like right now during this time, like I have a full-time job, and I'm very lucky that I have that, because I know a lot of people don't. And I still get to go to work. And that's why I'm hopeful that I'm still able to give back in some capacity when I can, because I know there are people that need help. But when you think about the importance of, doing, being involved with the city, all the meetings that I still have to go to. But when you think about COVID and how are we dealing with CARES funding, how are we, engaging with, the county judge, how are we listening to what the governor's doing and coming up with different plans and programs that you have to do. But then you're also sitting on, the DART board of directors and all the various meetings that you're doing. Sometimes it can be a little overwhelming, and we all need, different outlets and places to go to, and who we can talk to just, be someone that's supportive, that allows us to, bounce these opinions off of and the stress, so that it doesn't get to you. But not everyone has those opportunities. And, I don't know, with you, you got a family during this time, you're still working at school, you're trying to find ways to reach kids, what does that stress look like for you, and how are you able to cope with that right now in terms of work, but then worrying about so many people to make sure that, hey, at least, C-FBISD is doing a great job with school drive, but, how are kids getting food? How are we making sure that they're learning and not getting left behind? How are we sure that, they're being taken care of at home? And, what does that look like for you in terms of that kind of stress?
Well, it's funny that you just said that. When you see a kid that's there are signs, but not every single kid. There are kids that slip through the crack, and those are the dangerous ones, because they're not on our radar, and then things end up happening that you can't take back. It's funny because my daughter, I was kind of looking at the angle, and I guess if you watch the tape back, but my daughter's running in and out, and I'm actually at Vivian Field right now finishing out the year, and I'm on Mornings with the Mayor right now. Collins, you need to understand. Well, she's 6, she doesn't, so that's the stress. Is juggling, and people are not used to juggling. As a single father who's, I have split custody, so I don't have her all the time, but when I do have time with her, it's the hard understanding. And, they do Saturday Night Live Zooms, they did a Zoom meeting, and they talk about the parodies and the funniness of what happens. And, a lot of important people that are running Zooms and companies, you see kids climbing on them, and life's changed right now. It's different. And it's hard, and we'll get to it later because of tragedies that have happened, but perspective for me has changed a lot, because I used to be a very wanting to control things, and very, very uptight, and if I do this and this, then this will happen. And, now I don't let things come to me, but I come about it very differently, more calm, collected, excuse me. But you talk about, well, how are kids being fed? And, Dr. Chapman did a great job. And I know he was a guest earlier with you. He did a good job getting that set up and making sure, and even everybody in the community, if you go on Facebook, what can I do? How can I help feed kids? So we had that set up. We have programs set up all over all over the district for them to come in. And I was shocked the other day. I drove by R.L. Turner, and there was just a line all the way down to Beltline, all the way on that right lane. And you'd be shocked how many kids need food in our area, and just the discrepancy from some families to other families. And regardless, I'll tell you one thing: when they come to our schools in our district, that we love them all the same. I don't care. I specifically couldn't care less if one makes more money than the that's not the way we think as teachers. That's not why we get into the business we get into. We get into it to make a difference for all students. And, together we all can do that. And that's why we rely on community members and parents, all stakeholders. So I think when we delve into talking specifically about the mental aspect, and I know you're going to talk about this being the awareness month, but I think it's important that we all lean on one another for this.
Yeah, and I mean that's you bring up a very important point there in terms of leaning on one another, and how do you talk to someone that is dealing with something, whether it's anxiety, whether it's depression, whether it's just general stress, because stress is it's a huge impact to people, and depression it comes in different ways and forms. You don't always know. I mean, growing up, you might think, sometimes they always say, and I feel it's true, like the happiest person in the room, the most gregarious kind of individual, oftentimes for some reason is the one that's hurting the most, and they have the ability to mask it in public. And I was talking to my mom this past the last few days, and we were diving into some stuff. And when you talk about how do you address it, this goes back to a bigger issue that we're all dealing with stuff. And probably about 8 or 10 years ago, my mom suffered with depression and some things that impacted her. And at one point it got to the point to where, thankfully, it didn't happen, but she effectively was a cry for help, and took too many pain pills, I think, in an effort to do something we all are glad didn't happen. But it was impactful in the way of you just don't see it, and you just start looking at yourself like, what didn't I recognize? Where was the call for help? Because anytime I go out to California to see her, she's in great spirits, everyone's happy, everyone's fun loving, but the effects of life and different things, it just has a toll on you. But I've always been different in terms of how I deal with situations, and I'm more of I don't let a lot of things bother me. It's always that mantra, like, control what you can control. And I find that I had to find new ways to have conversations with my mom, and how that situation affected her, and knows that she still deals with that from time to time. And when I realize that she's in a situation where some of those feelings are bubbling up, I have to understand where she's coming from. And it's different, because when I'm struggling, I need to be approached from things in a much different capacity. And the way things impact me, and the way they might impact you, are completely different. So it's how do you connect with someone? How do you have that conversation to realize they're having these issues? Because it's hard to tell. Just going to be upfront. One of the biggest things that I don't talk about too much was 5 years ago, ended up in a situation where I got a call from my dad's girlfriend. She hadn't heard from him, asked me to go check on him, and turns out he had like a heart attack. And so by the time we got there, he was gone. So called 911, had to deal with the whole situation. But the wave of emotions that go through you in that entire week, the way that those impact you, the way that they affect people differently, because that loss affected my sister much differently than affected me, and the way that it affected my mom, the way that it affected his girlfriend, the way that it affected the rest of our family and friends. And you start thinking, where do I go from this? And how was I able to take the fear, the stress, the uncertainty, and just the sadness and loss, and able to move forward? And we all have different mindsets and ways that we push ourselves to overcome and to find strength. And seeing how much my sister was hurting, or my mom or my dad's girlfriend, it was more of a decision of, do I, take a stronger approach here? How do I put on a big face and carry forward, a feeling of strength to help them through when you're hurting yourself. And the great thing is, having a great network of friends that, you can talk to and be vulnerable about, and dealing with some of those things allowed me to engage with my friends now much differently, who have gone through the same thing in terms of, how did I want someone to be there for me, and what did I need, and how did I push forward? But, some of the things that lingered from that for me was just the feeling of anxiety that I had, because, when you realize when someone just suddenly goes, and you have a history of, heart problems in your family for like 2 or 3 years after that, I'd walk around with anxiety sometimes. It might have just been heartburn from eating some spicy food or some acid reflux, but you get a feeling like, oh, is this it? And, it would wake me up in the middle of the night and some of those things, but you eventually move through it, and having a support system is key. And, you don't choose these moments, you don't choose what's happening, and not everyone gets the insight into your life, because when you're in public some days, you're at work, you're at your job, you're a public figure, you have to be strong, you have to put on this face and this persona that people are looking at, and everyone just assumes everything's going all right. But, everyone's dealing with something on some level. And, this kind of gets to you as well, because I know that you've had some stuff, in this past year. And, I don't want to speak out of turn or say anything correctly, but, I just, with what you've had to deal with, seeing it from, the outside looking in, just, and watching you through this last year, I guess share some of the stuff that had kind of happened with you, if that's okay. And, how were you able to deal with it at the beginning, and what help and stuff did you get through the middle to kind of push through and, get to where you are now, which is some semblance, moving forward the best that you can.
Sure. So I'm going to try to be strong here, but
if you need a break, just let me know. And
it's all right. So May 19th, 2019, worst day of my life, best day ever for my sweet daughter, Finley Grace Infante, because she went to heaven. She went home to be with Jesus. Excuse me. Sorry.
You're good.
I'd feel better, I could speak from the heart, but I think my mind would jump everywhere. So I wrote a little bit of, if you wouldn't mind, I'd go ahead and read it for you.
Yeah.
So I say here, my name is Kenny Infante. I'm the proud daddy of Finley Grace Infante, Finley or Finny or Finny, who was born on April 7th, 2016. She went to be with Jesus on May 19th, 2019. The time in between was special, and she made the most of her time here on earth. She was jubilee, full of energy, with an infectious smile. Finny made her presence known as she would enter every room. She was loud, proud, full of love. You could not miss her, as she had the whitest curly hair you could ever imagine. Her hobbies included all things Moana, dogs, and she loved wardrobe changes. Finley was the biggest fashionista. She was truly a girly girl, loved the color pink. Finley enjoyed being with family and loved to play games such as Slug Bug in the Car. So just to give you a little background, she was 3 years old, 3 and a month, and she was at her mother's house, and that house had a pool. It was around 12 o'clock during that day, and her mom went to go get ready. They had a pool party, not at their house, but the next door house. And I'm not going to go into really the depths of exactly what happened with that, but she made her way into the pool, and we don't know how long specifically she was under, but they tried CPR at the house. They called 911. She was rushed to the hospital. The neighbor had actually called me, and so I rushed up to the hospital, and I walk in and I saw something you never want to see, and that's your daughter being worked on when you know she's already gone. Toughest thing, that's what wakes me up. And like you talked about your father, and I don't know if you spoke and you talk about getting through strong things, but there are things that kind of get seared in your brain. And I've heard it from like 2 or 3 people, is I've now joined a club that nobody wants to be in, and that's a father or a parent losing their child. Like, you shouldn't bury your child. You've joined the club of somebody who lost their father way too early. And so what are the tools, what are the resources to help you move forward? For me, everybody deals with it differently. I feel good talking about it. It helps me. It helps keep her memory alive. Because if you isolate, that's when the mental aspect becomes negative more so than positive. And for me, it's my faith. I believe in Jesus Christ. I believe that he died for our sins, and it's because of him that I know that I will meet my daughter again, and I'm going to do what I need to do to make sure I get there, because that is important to me. So she's not gone. So, but she's gone for now, and it still doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. Ebbs and flows, man. So some days are good, some days are bad. Like the first 3 months when this tragedy happened, it was so freaking slow. Like every minute, it was just, oh my gosh, this is pain. I can't undo it. Like it just, wow, 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 wow. And like then the last 9 months went by like that. So it's a weird thing to talk about. And I appreciate you giving me this avenue to talk about her, and I appreciate you talking about what happened specifically with you, because when I reached out to you and said, hey man, how can I support, what's going on? And you talked to me about some things that happened in your life, and nobody would know that. It's funny how well we mask things. Nobody has a t-shirt that says, hey, I'm thinking about taking my own life today, right? Like, that's not how it works. I don't know. For me, it's just my faith, and then how can I keep myself busy? And one thing that I've really put myself into is work. I love being at work. That's what helps keep me busy. But what can I do to change and help affect and help other parents to make sure this doesn't happen? So me and a buddy I went to high school with, another buddy who went to Newman Smith, who's a lawyer, and my cousin and my sister, we've began a process of starting a new nonprofit organization, and it's going to be called Finley's Grace. And so with that, our goal is to raise awareness of, advocate for, and increase access to pool safety structures among parents and caretakers of young children of birth to 5 years old in North Texas. And did you know that besides the initial birth of losing our kids, that is the number one as far as why we lose kids is from drownings in the state of Texas, ages 1 through 4.
Yeah, and
so it's a very important thing to be aware of.
I think it's definitely important, and it's good to hear that you're finding a way to give back and potentially help that next family, and create awareness to something that people are aware of, but I don't think that they take it as seriously as they probably should, right? And it's especially as we're approaching the summer months and people getting into pools, and probably more people staying at home with their pools because they can't go to like a rec center pool where there's lifeguards and all these other things and people that are there to help. Sure. That you need kind of this education. You need something that's going to help in that avenue. And I'm glad you are taking that approach and have been able to pull friends together to find a way to remember, Finley in a positive way, to where her memory can hopefully help save the lives of so many more going forward, bringing awareness to that.
Yeah. We thought about how, because there are a lot of nonprofits that talk about pool safety structure or pool safety itself. But we're going to separate ourselves here, and we're actually going to put our money where our mouth is. And, our goals are to produce educational material regarding pool safety structures, but specifically provide reduced or no cost installation of pool safety structures. And then that's going to then in turn reduce the frequency of drowning deaths. And we have many different ideas. Why would I help a family that has a pool? Well, that's just because they have a pool doesn't mean they have money. Some people move into houses that they can't afford things. Divorce happens. Families are left. Think about grandparents that are taking care of young children that don't have gates. And not just building gates, but we also thought, what about those that their kids are now 9, 10, 11, 12? They can open the gate up themselves. They don't need a gate. So we've actually we're going to partner with different pool people that build them, and we can actually get those gates transferred over. And it's kind of the gift that keeps giving, so we can really reduce that rate. And then many years down the road, after we've done this for a while, that might be something I might look into lobbying into, because if you think about it, Mayor Dye, when you and I left the hospital, we didn't have to have some safety structure with a seatbelt. That became a law. So these are things that I, those are long-term goals, but as of right now, I want to reduce that rate and tell my story, because her life is not in vain. So yeah, Finley's middle name was Grace as she moved, and her demeanor was the simple elegance. More importantly, she wore her heart on her sleeve. And she's just an amazing kid, and that's what helps me deal with the mental part, so I don't just sit and dwell.
Yeah, and I mean, that's kind of one of the things that I was thinking about, because I think about how busy I've been these last 5 years, just with work and everything else, and being mayor and being involved. And is it an idea that I'm fortunate enough that I have the ability to throw my life into so many different things, to take my mind off of certain things. And I've wondered that same thing, like, if I were to just stop for a minute and sit down and think, where would I be in the cycle, in terms of getting through this entire process, or, would things impact me differently? And I've been, fortunate that, as you said, talking about Finley and, talking with friends, helps you kind of get through it and, feel, at least put your mind in a better place than where it can go. And, I had an opportunity, I was lucky enough that, one of the things that was the most therapeutic things for me was actually speaking at my dad's, funeral. I got up and talked for 15 minutes. I didn't get through it all without, breaking into a little bit of a tear here and there, especially as I had to look at my sister. But it was, being able to tell the people that I loved the most, that were closest to me and respected him, my thoughts and feelings and what I thought, I felt like a giant burden was lifted off of my shoulders. And I've always thought, what are the conversations we need to have with people that are going through something? Sometimes it's difficult to talk to them and to know what you can ask and can't ask. And, I think, from, you said those first 3 months were probably the toughest until you got back into school and throwing yourself back into work and really trying to get your, back into your normal habits before that happened. But, what were some of the conversations that you were having that helped, with the process to get your mind into a better place and to, help you kind of move forward? Because I think that's important for people to hear, in terms of, if you recognize something in someone that is dealing with someone, have the courage to have that conversation. But what is it that you need to be able to say? And how do you have that conversation with them to know that, hey, I'm here for you. We care about you. We want to help, but, not cross a line or feel like you're being insensitive or something. What was that for you?
So early on, and I will tell you, growing up in this area, I've been blessed. I'll tell you, I had in my first marriage, which I've only been married once, but I had 10 best men, and I have 10 cousins. So we all know self-isolation is very dangerous, right? When you're going through tragedies, being alone with your thoughts, not a good thing unless you've built yourself up until you get there. What can you do specifically? But early on, when you're going through depression, and, I don't consider myself depressed, but when things happen like that, you are going to be depressed. There is no doubt about that. I think specifically just, and those that that go through these mental health aspects, just being aware, they're not looking to hurt others. But one thing that stays and is prevalent on my mind is my daughter. I still have one left here, and she sees what I do. So if I'm just all sleeping and laying and not doing anything and not trying to do something with my life, she's taking notes. And so that's one thing that really that weighs on my mind. I think for somebody who's going through this, you've got to think of others. And it's okay if you're just thinking of yourself during this time, but I would confide in somebody, somebody that you trust. Find somebody. Whether you're at school, you can go talk to a counselor, an administrator, anybody. Just get out there. Once you start to feel these thoughts, it's okay. Go out and speak to somebody. I think the self isolation aspect is what makes it really dangerous. And maybe talk to me about, have you had a conversation with your mom and the thought process that was there, and what is she doing to try to remain healthy?
Yeah, I mean, it was the first part, it was a little interesting because I'd never, you grow up your whole life not thinking anything's wrong, everyone's happy, everything's going on, and then this kind of situation just pops up and it catches you completely off guard, and then you start doubting yourself a little bit in terms of like what was it that I didn't do or that I didn't see, and how did I need to connect with my mom? Because at that time she was living in California, and I was still here, but my dad was here as well. And I think I don't know if my sister had moved out there. I think she had moved out there as well, but this was at night, and so she was asleep and wasn't aware. But it was having conversations with her as she kept her in the hospital for a little while, and when she got out, it was you could see in the look in her eyes that she wanted to move forward. She wanted to be better. There were definitely a lot of great changes that happened in her life, but it was being there more for me, going out and having some conversations, but realizing that the conversations we were having were a little bit difficult. It had changed a little, because that there's something else there, and it was tough to try to navigate that on the front end. But now it's now that I understand where my mom might be coming from, or how she's feeling, and knowing that she feels and perceives things differently than I do, it's how do I connect and say, I hear you on that, I recognize what you're saying and feeling, and let's talk about how we're going to move forward and away from some of these feelings. And I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not really wouldn't say I know exactly what, but I think it's just being there and having those conversations and letting her know that I care, and that my sister cares, and the whole family cares, and all we want's her to be strong, which she has been. And there hasn't really been an issue since, but it's definitely having those conversations and being able to express how you feel, but also understand what they feel. I wonder, with kids, because you can probably see this more, does their attitude change one day or not? You see them kind of pull away, and, how can you be strong enough to walk up to one of them, especially in one of the hallways, and, recognize like, hey, do you need to talk, or what's going on, or, how can we help, and catch it early so that it doesn't get further and further down to where the pain becomes so severe that, they feel that there's no option. And, I think those kind of same mindsets go with me as I think about that. And it was interesting at first, but it's been good. And I don't know what do you kind of see? What do the counselors kind of tell you?
I'm just listening to you as well. Death and depression, it chooses anybody and anybody, right? Like, it doesn't matter if you're in California, if you're in Florida, if you're in Massachusetts, if you're in Farmers Branch, if you're in Laredo, if you're in Highland Park, that happens. There's no denying that. I think it's just educating and catching the signs early, like you said. Some people hide it well, and that's the scary part. But I think it's just talking about it, educating people. I can't bring back my daughter, definitely can't, but I can push forward and try to educate people on that. much like yourself, talking about depression and why people do that. Just bringing it to light right now. That's why I was honored for you to have me on, because I think we share in that the education portion is very huge, and wanting to see change, because these are things that can, we can't deny death eventually, but when they're at a young age, and we can prevent drownings. Now, we're not going to be able to save everybody from depression, but educating, enlightening people, letting them know your story. If it only changes one, then it's worth it. And that's the goal here. So I see that this can happen to anybody and everybody, but putting the tools and resources and parents that are watching this in the community today, you have to have these conversations with your kids. You may think they're normal. Just say, hey, have that, you're in the car ride. Just so you know, son or daughter, I want to let you know that if you ever have any weird thoughts going on, that I'm open and here. You would be shocked that some parents don't ever say that, but those are some things that need to be said. And, brothers and sisters of those that are older, these thoughts don't leave you. Sometimes they can come to light. So, having conversations with family members, and just keeping things at the forefront, I think that's a huge thing to kind of change this. And, those of you with summer coming up and that have pools, I'm telling you, this can happen to anybody and everybody. And, I hope that my story puts this and sears it in your head that this can happen. And I hope that you lose sleep if you don't have these barriers to make sure that your kids are okay, because I do want to change things. So I kind of jumped all over the place there, Mayor Dye, but I'm so honored that we share in this, my man.
Yeah, and it's you're gonna jump because it's a lot of emotions, and not some of it's not the easiest thing to talk about. You want to make sure that you're getting the right words out there that make sense, so that because overall it's I think the story behind a lot of this is most people are dealing with something, and while it's definitely on a different level, it's an understanding of, is someone dealing with anxiety? Are they dealing with depression? What fears do they have that potentially lead you through those other, things of stress and extra anxiety and, depression? And that mental health encompasses so many different things. And it's so important right now, especially as you think of young kids that are in, difficult situations. And you're thinking about the parents as well that are also in difficult situations, and a recognition that, people need to be there. And, how do we find the right, signs to say, hey, let's have a conversation. Let's reach out, because as you said, you had people there for you, and you were able to throw yourself into other things. And, fortunately, for a lot of people, you were able to get back to doing what it was that you loved, because you're impacting so many people and their futures that it's great that you were able to get back. And, in my situation, what I took with me from a lot of that was how would your dad want you to move forward? What do we want you to be doing? Which, hopefully I feel I've done some of that, but, there are days where, would you go back and say, yeah, I'd like to, have a few more conversations, or do something that, is make sure that's in the right vein and in my dad's eyes, the way that he would want me to be living. And I think that helped me out a lot too, because, as I strive to hopefully be a good person and to give back and to, strive to help out where I can, that I'm able to do that more in his honor. Much like, you're finding ways to move forward and do stuff in Finley's honor that helps other kids and other things. And so just grateful for, you being willing to come on and talk about something I know that was difficult for you, especially your family, but how you're getting through that, and, bringing awareness to the struggles. But, just thank you also for your leadership. And while I'm sad you're leaving field, I am excited that you get to go to Newman Smith. And I guess you're going to be rejoined with Miss Jimenez there.
Yes, sir. I'm excited. I honestly feel like I have two families, and last year I felt like this could have happened, but I honestly, when I have these conversations with people, it's win-win for me, because both Mr. Hunter and Dr. Jimenez are fantastic leaders. I will say one thing before we jump off. I wanted to give a quick plug to kind of where we're going with this specifically. But if you look here, we're working through the creative process of the F and the G surrounded by a pool. So once you guys see that later on, please, I'll be relying on you and other city officials to help spread the word about that. And, it's good to have good friends, and it's good to have conversations with people. And I look forward. We're hoping to get this launched probably here in the next month and a half.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to it, and I'm happy to help however I can. But gonna jump into just a few rapid fire questions. Maybe
Sure.
Bring this back up a little bit before we get on out of here. But say it was 1998, and there was a soccer scrimmage. Who would win, Comets 84 or Comets 82?
I go 84s. I
like that.
I don't know how happy. I think Hudgel would be happy with that answer. I don't think Mr. Curtis Partain would.
No. Yeah, David would definitely enjoy that. We had a pretty solid team back then. But since you are going back to Newman Smith, and given your background in soccer, do you see yourself potentially helping out there at all, or is you're trusting the coaches that are already down there working with the team?
Well, I'm going to help where I'm needed. I'm sure I'll be busy, doing many other things. But of course, you can't help, your first love, which is what you did. Of course, I'm going to kind of look into that, but I'm not going to be an overbearer. I'll be there to support however I can. Our jobs are more, I guess we deal with more of the social emotional issues that happen throughout the day. Now, if Dr. Jimenez were to tell me that's something you need to focus on, then of course that's what I'm going to do. But I think the soccer coach and the athletic director of the school, I think they'll be able to hone in on that. But of course, if they do really well, don't think I'm not going to be showing up to a lot of games. And if they're doing the same thing, I would probably give some advice.
And one final thing, because it was a shock when I saw you yesterday with it, and still seeing it now. But I noticed you got your COVID beard on. You going to keep that thing all the way through No Shave November, or what are you going to do? Because you're normally very clean shaven.
I know, and I apologize to all those in the community that have to look at this. One lady friend of mine said I'm digging the beard, so maybe it gave me a little confidence, and then I think I've taken it a little too far. The other day somebody tried to hand me a couple dollars. I said, no, I'm not homeless. No, man, I'm kidding. But it'll be clean shaven by the beginning of the school year. I know that for sure next year.
Gotcha. Okay. Well,
yes,
we'll
sir.
be sad to see it go.
Well, you said you had one yourself.
Yeah, just I did a few years ago. I had grown out a much thicker beard, but it did not look good, and I realized at that time I shouldn't bring it back. Much like some of the other looks I've retired for the rest of my life. But definitely not afraid to try something new. But Kenny, cannot thank you enough for your time this morning. Thank you enough for what you're doing in our community and the different ways that you're trying to make an impact in this world. And so, just truly appreciate you, what you're doing, and look forward to watching your career as you move on to Newman Smith.
Well, thank you so much, Mayor Dye. I appreciate the platform. You continue to do great things in our community, and specifically Farmers Branch, and let me know what we can do. We need more Mayor Dyes around here. I know that, especially during these times. So I wouldn't want to walk through this crazy time with anybody else. So you're much appreciated.
I appreciate that. And, just one final note to leave everyone with, while May is Mental Health Awareness Month, it should be every month. And we need to make sure that we're addressing these critical issues and important issues that, affect us all. And so, probably find a way to get some more resources out to people to potentially help, but, just pay attention. And if you see something that's a little off, as an individual, if you're watching, don't be afraid to have a conversation with someone because you might be the difference that keeps them, moving forward and on the right path in their life. But I just want to thank everyone today for watching Mornings with the Mayor. I'm your host, Robert Dye. We have a lot of things that are going on in Farmers Branch, a lot of exciting new developments. And so next week, probably going to try to have a conversation with our Director of Parks and Rec, Michael Mashburn, and some of the exciting news that we have going forward in our community in terms of what are we doing with Summer Funshine, upgrades to the rec center, some other things. So would be a good episode to tune into. But until then, appreciate y'all tuning in, and we'll see y'all next time. Thanks.